My name is Jay Sugarman, and I want to welcome you to Museum Open House. This ongoing series features and highlights many of the outstanding museums and other cultural institutions. The main purpose of most programs is to inform viewers about current and upcoming exhibits, various programs, resources, and other opportunities that are available for the general public. Today, via Zoom, we're fortunate to have as our guest Elliott Arkin. Elliott is a highly accomplished artist, designer, educator, and entrepreneur. He's here today to inform us about the Salvator Mundi Museum of Art, which is located in Brooklyn, New York. The museum is part of the contemporary art project entitled the Real Salvator Mundi, which Elliott established in 2017. During the program, you'll hear why and how the museum came about and how it's grown, developed, and operates today. We'll go on a behind-the-scenes tour and in the process come to better understand and appreciate all the museum has to offer, as well as Elliott's various efforts to develop the Salvator Mundi brand. Let's start by meeting Elliott and then learning all about the Salvator Mundi Museum of Art. Welcome, Elliott. So delighted you're able to be here.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you, and thank you for inviting me.
It's been so much fun finding out about the museum and some of the various offshoots that you've developed. Eager to hear more and have you inform viewers. But before we jump right to that, I also think it would be of interest to hear a little bit about your background, perhaps artistic, professional interest, please.
Well, I moved to New York. I've been an artist. I moved to New York in 1983. I was born in Miami, Florida, and I was always one of those kids who, in school there were always a few kids who could draw well, but I had a three-dimensional facility, which I have met other sculptors who've been similar, and so it was something that I was my identity since I was a little kid, and but as I got older, and I was very interested in science, but I began to see that art was a great way to experiment with ideas, and once that came about, I decided I wanted to be an artist. So I I went to Amherst College, and then I graduated and came here in 1983, and have been pursuing a career as an artist in New York since then. Um, uh,
I know we're fortunate to have you in your studio area where some of your work is. If you want to take a few minutes to highlight some past and perhaps current projects, and then we'll move on to the museum.
oh, sure. Well, this is actually, now the way art is. I had for many years. I had my studio in Dumbo, for people um, who know that area. It's an area that has a lot of art studios. So I was there for many years, and now my studio is my home as well. So it's an open loft space, and I have a more of the messy stuff is in the back part, and so I work, you know. In my living room, and the way art is today, if I'm doing something large, I'll 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 rent a temporary space,
Mhm.
and a lot of times they're being fabricated in different parts and stuff like that. But a lot of times, you know, today my projects are so much of the time is spent in planning and designing the work. But like, here's a piece. This was a piece from the. Uh, this is an old piece, actually, from the 90s.
Mm,
Um, but and
stunning. Okay.
it's called Le Cadre, and it's really made up of three-dimensional renditions of famous works of art.
Mm.
But then if you go here, I have a whole. This is sort of my area of where I have all my little sketches and design and things I'm working on, and various projects I've done over the years, and little models for them. So
Has the way you approach your work changed anyway over the years?
Yes, I would say actually I've always sort of said that I kind of think I've had like two careers in the art world because I moved in '83 and I was very much, I would say that I was a figurative sculptor and coming from where I went to school, which was a kind of a traditional kind of art education. But then but I always had this kind of conflict between the traditionalist and then a kind of conceptual part of who I am. And so I moved in '83 and the work that I did I immediately started doing well from a business from an art market point of view. I mean, I got people's. I mean, the works I were doing, I did were selling well, and then with the recession, there was a major art recession in 1990, and a lot of galleries closed, and I really my market or collapsed with the rest of the market and I kind of then stumbled around for almost 10 years. I think it was more like yeah, like 8. And I took the opportunity to re-enter because I wanted to be a part of the cultural dialogue of the art community. And when I came back, and it really was very much happenstance. I was at a certain point. I was about to have a child. I always kind of felt, I'm whenever I was working, and I'm a fairly uh, a realistic person. I would be like, listen, one of these days you're gonna have to give this up and get a real job, just like everyone thinks about artists. And so I invited a lot of people over to the studio just to sort of look and say something. And they all a lot of the consistency of people in the art world is I did these cartoons. They were jokes. They were three-dimensional. And people would say, I like these. And so um, one person was a critic, Charlie Finch, who I had a sculpture of him, and he was a notorious uh, just a kind of a beast in the art world. He was a large figure, and he was not kind to gallery people, and he would have fights in the middle of gallery. So I did a sculpture of him eating Jeffrey Deitch, like Ugolino, and the editor of ArtNet put it up. They had a cartoon section, and that really started the whole thing because I then got an email from him saying, "Hey, I had really positive feedback. If you want to make more of those or send more of those, I'll be glad to put them up." And at that time, the cartoonists that they had on board, so it quickly became the three of us. It was Nicole Eisenman, me, and Olaf Westfalen, and we were the three cartoonists. And Artnet was at that time it was the only it was the major website for the art world. And although from a business point, I mean, I wasn't I wasn't selling them. But I loved all that I had a platform to
Mhm.
to show what I did. Although these were minor works in my mind. But from that, it was always I mean, I would go to fairs and be introduced, and people would say, "Oh, you're the guy who does those cartoons." And all of a sudden, I would be like, "Wow, I was
Fabulous.
making those figures sculpt, and no one knew who I was." And then so I really enjoyed that, and that started me in the notion of of really focusing my work on a kind of it does still there are things that I do that still use my technical skills as a draft, as a and facility. But then it allows me to really work with the idea of humor and commentary in the art.
Well, we're going to enjoy
Sure.
some of that humor when we find out about the museum. But before we step in and see some
Mhm.
current and previous work, for those maybe not as familiar, with the Salvador Mundi painting and the background and history, just very briefly, a little highlight of some of the important points, and then we definitely want to enjoy the museum.
Sure. Well, in 2017, it was announced that this painting called the Salvator Mundi was going to be put up for auction, and prior to that, unless maybe you were very much involved in Renaissance art, certainly within the contemporary art world, it really wasn't that known.
Mm.
And it was an interesting story. And then not only that, it was being put up for auction in the contemporary art sales at Christie's. And prior to that, um, yeah, the so we started hearing about the story, which is it a real Da Vinci? Is it not a real Da Vinci? They started, they put it up at Christie's, and there were lines of people wanting to take a look at it, and it was estimated to go for $100 million. At
Wow.
that time, the highest price was around 180 at auction. So, I mean, yes, it's an expensive painting, but it fell within the sort of thing. And lo and behold, it goes for $450
Wow.
million. That's
Unbelievable.
that's 2.5 times higher than the record at that time.
Wow.
And the story, and of course then it got a lot of major stories, and not only that, the buyer is Mohammed bin Salman, the Saudi prince. And the story was so fascinating to me that all of a sudden this phrase, and prior to that, the phrase Salvator Mundi, it just sounded like it sounded like Sal Mundy, and it reminded me of Al Bundy. And it's kind of, and I said, they've now taken a term which was an antiquated term in our language, and it now can be identifiable as a brand. And in many ways, it's how contemporary art and contemporary artists have to think about themselves. I mean, it's really a kind of
Mm.
comes from the study of how the engines and the wheels kind of turn within society and our culture and the art world and the art market, and so forth. And so I said to myself, well, wouldn't that be fun, just kind of say I'm to create the brand, a symbolism of a kind of Cinderella story, and a kind of rags to riches. It's a very American story. So I immediately applied for several trademarks.
Mm.
And lo and behold, because no one had when you do the trademark search, that term at that point didn't exist on the web at all,
Mm.
other than in relation to the auction. So I immediately got trademarks. I've gotten more since then, and that's when I launched the idea that I said this, and I immediately thought of really interesting kind of things to make and create, as the Salvatore Mundi brand. And then
So,
I kind of humorously say that my goal is to, a brand is for sale. So I'll sell it to Mohammed bin Salman for 1% of what he paid for the painting at this point.
seems like a good deal. Seems like a good deal. Well,
It's a bargain.
most definitely, how did that lead, again, very briefly, because we want to share some of the items,
Sure.
to the museum of all things?
Well, so once I started the brand and I started making some initial web page and product, then I started saying, okay, what do I do? Well, now I have to promote and make my own effort to build the brand.
Ah.
And I started thinking, okay, so what kinds of ventures and things can I do? Um, so I'm trying to think of if there was anything before the museum. The museum was one of the first. So at one point, because remember, Mohammed bin Salman, we haven't seen the painting since it's been auctioned. It's been
Mm.
stored away. So I started saying, well, I need to start doing my own kind of keeping activities and things for it to do. So I thought of starting
Yeah.
a museum, and I kind of equate the act is similar to where you have like like toys. They create movies so that they can create a toy line.
Yeah,
They
exactly.
it's kind of a reverse, so that by creating a museum, you're creating a work of art unto itself, and that is used to promote the brand. So there's a bit of there's satire, there's satire and humor in the idea of creating a museum, but it really it's been very useful, because then I've been able to bring it into some of the objects I'm doing, and connect them with the museum. But then at
And
one point, and I'm not at liberty to discuss much, but I sold the idea for a Broadway musical to Kiola Productions,
wow.
and I'm under contract, so I can't mention much more about that. And I continuously think of various things.
Fabulous, fabulous. Well, let's look at some of the items that have been, perhaps are on display. This is very intriguing and in true spirit, I think, of your
Yeah.
venture here. The mechanical bank.
Yes, and it really this is the current show, and it I have it up for a little too long. I've got to change agents soon, but it was a project. See, then what started happening is every April 1st, well, it's only been the last two. The last two, April 1st, I would come out with an idea for a project or something about the Salvator Mundi. And so the first year I created a tapestry. A lot of these things I've really been able to explore the wonders of the internet and things you can get done. So you can get these incredibly complicated tapestry hand woven. They're done by machine, but they look like tapestries you see at the Met. And so I did a long lost tapestry that was found in New England, and I have a whole backstory, and they get picked up, in the web. So this project, I announced that there was a mechanical bank that was purchased in the Ponchatoula flea and antique market, and that it was mysterious, and they were trying to find out what it was, and there are stories online. And first I announced that, and that was not connected with the museum. But then I said, "Oh, this will be fun," because then 6 months later I could announce that the museum had purchased the item that was found in Louisiana.
That's
So,
fabulous.
so then I was able to come out with that. And what it is, and then see that now, because this was always intended to be a limited edition, and as opposed to sort of an artist who creates a sculpture and then they produce a limited edition, it now has more of a connectedness and officialness and validity, because the museum is going to produce a limited edition of the one of a kind item that was found in Louisiana. And it's
Nice,
a
nice.
mechanical bank. It's a functioning bank. You lift the little ball, you put a penny on his palm, and then there's a lever in the back, and when you press the lever, he blesses you and takes your money.
Very good, very good. Sounds like a lot of that going on maybe in Brooklyn. For
I
the,
don't think I don't think it's limited to Brooklyn.
that's for sure. That's for sure. Moving on, we have limited time. Just a
Yes,
couple words about these other items we want to
sure.
share. Um,
Okay, this was the show prior to that. This was the Salvatore Barbie, which was that came out when, and one of the questions that we talked about was, how do you curate shows. That's one of the challenges, is to keep coming up and planning ideas. This was show that actually I was having dinner with my good friend Robert Storr, and I was saying, oh, what should the next topic be? And I got to give Robert a credit because it was during the Barbie phenomenon. He said Barbie. I said, oh, that's a good idea, Salvatore Barbie. So I then went and created, and this is an image which I'm going to have actually painted, and it will be it's an oil painting, and this is the Salvatore Barbie, and then we did a whole show of you know uh, compare and contrast the phenomenon of Barbie and the phenomenon of Salvatore Mundi.
Perfect. Oh, what a wonderful one that would
And
have
I,
been.
and I have images of the golden rule, the proportional thing and how they fit into this and how they fit into Barbie's face.
Oh,
So there's a lot
that's
there's a
great.
lot that ended up working out.
Again, just
I don't want to give away my secrets, but Chat GPT helps me out a lot in writing all the materials for the museum.
it's a fabulous resource, that is for
Yes,
sure.
yes.
Again, in the about 7 minutes we have left, we want to
Okay.
sort of not
Here's
race,
some more.
but
So this is a piece of jewelry. And so it's a pen. I do have the trademark for Salvatore Mundi for jewelry, and some of the brands and some of the products. Do have a legitimate. They do have legs, what I say, in the marketplace, and jewelry could be a very a successful because I think there's a place for it. We have Salvatore Mundi coffee, which does well, and there are some food products, but we're going to have perfume that's going to do well. So some things are directly humorous and they really are just art objects, and then the others are really they work. So this is a pendant, and I'm actually working on doing like a giant wrappers bling, all pave diamonds and
fabulous.
18 karat gold and all that for it.
I think Leonardo da Vinci would be full behind that, I think, for sure.
It-
For sure.
Well,
Eh,
they said he was a very flamboyant dresser, so I think he
I
would.
definitely, definitely. And I think this is the tapestry you're referring
Yes,
to.
this is the tag that was put on the tapestry and in Dutch because there's a certain point there's where they think the painting may have been in Holland at a certain point in its history. So I kind of alluded to that maybe that's when this was done when it was in Holland. So I had a good friend of mine who's Dutch tell me that that means savior of the world in Dutch.
Oh, so much fun. This is fabulous. Um, Speaking of fun, these next couple, what do we see
Yes, well, this
here?
was in the beginning with the whole NFT. So I started doing all these various takes on if Jeff Koons had done the Salvatore Mundi and I put the blue ball in his hand, or I have all these kind of artistic inspirations. I think they're called. Oh, this was an NFT when the NFTs were out. This is called Salvatore Munki, Munki. And it was, of course, on the Bored Ape Yacht Club. This sold immediately a fairly prominent art collector. Bought this,
That's great. And here
but
we're talking about some of the items, the
there's
pasta
the pasta
sauce
sauce,
on wood,
hand right
the
there's
bag here,
the bag.
fabulous. And branching
There's
out,
Robert's store. Yes,
that's great.
if you go
That's
on our
great.
website, he is our brand spokesman at the current time. And for those of you, most people know Robert Storr was the senior curator for the Museum of Modern Art.
That's
And I'm
incredible.
very fortunate. He likes my work. I don't know how, but I don't want to question it.
That's fabulous, fabulous. What's been some of the reaction and feedback to the museum in the few years it's been open?
If from people who visit it's been a very positive. I always encourage people to leave a Google review, and
Mm.
but people come and they kind of I've been very they go with the flow. They fall into the idea, and they get kind of like, well, this is an interesting idea, and they like what they see, and I have a nice talk with a lot of people. Um, and then there are a couple. The last person was very upset because I didn't I early on, when people would set up a time to visit, I would give them free coffee. But I can't do that anymore because I'm in retail stores now, so I don't want to compete. I can't compete
Mhm.
with my retailers; they get mad at me. So she was upset about that, and she wrote
Well,
that in Google.
I think I caught that comment. Uh,
Yes, yes.
what are some of your goals for the near future and maybe upcoming plans for the museum and maybe other spin-offs from the brand?
Well, I'll tell you, see, for the museum, and since this is an art project, the way I've always told people is that now that I've produced exhibitions, those exhibitions can go on to be loaned to other institutions as small installations. So, there's no reason, as part of the whole Salvator Mundi art project, that you could have the exhibition of Salvatore Barbie. You could have the exhibition of the bank. So the future with the museum is that it can function in the way all museums function in that way. And my responsibility is to continue to come up with shows that are intriguing, and hopefully people enjoy, and ideas, and relate to the project.
Well, definitely, you definitely have a growing audience of appreciative viewers for sure, and consumers. Elliot, in the 2 minutes we have left,
Sure.
looking back, what are some of your thoughts to where this has all grown in the few years that you got this inspiration for the brand, for the museum? What are some reflections as we close?
Well, I think that it's really been a project that has allowed me to tap into the various ways in which my creativity has worked. It's always been a struggle for me. The contemporary art world can often be restricting for an artist. You are successful in doing this, and then the marketplace like puts demands that that's what you do, and you got to keep doing that and keep doing that. And my mind work is more of it has a conceptual quality, which allowed me to do jewelry from it, do this object, do events, do sell the idea for a musical, and that is really why it's been able to stick with me, because there's never ending amount of outlets of things that I can play with creatively.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, unfortunately, we've come to the end of the program. Want to thank you again for taking the time to be here, for sharing the museum, for sharing your other ventures related to Salvador Mundi, and your fantastic creativity and sense of humor. Continued success with future endeavors.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Also want to
And
thank
everyone's welcome to come by.
And we'll have the in the credits contact information
Okay,
and
terrific.
the museum website. But for now, want to thank those of you watching for joining us and hope you'll be able to tune in next time.